Welcome to Red Zone Extra on Facebook Live. We are here at a return engagement.
Yeah,
Our first return engagement of the year. Happy to be at 11815 South Black Bob Road in Olathe. You were right, Vahe. I couldn't quite make out the backwards lettering above the door, so I got it called up on the screen. We're here to talk Chiefs, and we want you to talk Chiefs with us. Send us your question and comments. We'll get to as many as we can, and we will discuss the topics with the panel. Sam Mellinger, Vahe Greorgian. I'm Blair Kerkhoff. This is Herbie Teope, and as Vahe likes to say, we're in missing man formation today.
I was going to say missing Sam formation.
Missing Sam
Well,
formation.
that's because you're more clever than me. You're quite the poet.
So I spent too much time thinking about nonsense, I think is what you mean. But you go ahead.
No.
It's your show.
No. You come up with a great line. Go ahead.
No Sam McDowell today, which I don't know if we have clearance to say why. He's on assignment, getting better from being sick.
That's a good way
Yeah,
of putting
that's
it.
on assignment.
That's right. Get well, Sam.
Yeah, Sam.
Need you in Chicago for the Bears. We are a lot of news this week from Chiefs world. The biggest topic, of course, was the claiming of Terrell Suggs off the waiver wire. And let's just go through this as it unfolded. He was released by the Cardinals.
Correct.
Did he play Sunday?
He did not. He was actually waived on Saturday.
Okay.
And this claiming actually comes on the heels of Alex Okafor suffering a season-ending pectoral injury. So it filled an absolute need. But what you get here is a guy who has 138 career sacks, which is ninth all-time with NFL sack leaders. And you have a guy, I asked Andy Reid yesterday, is he a plug-and-play option? Meaning, can he actually just, without any practices or knowing the scheme that the Chiefs like to run, can he hit the ground running? And Reid says, absolutely. You know, he is a plug-and-play option, but he has to pick up some of the things. And what helps him out tremendously is his familiarity with Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs defensive coordinator. Both of them were in Baltimore together in 2014 and 2015. And Suggs is a guy who can fill a rotational role, or if you want to try him out as a starter, I think you can put him in there.
He's going to play. I mean, there's no, they don't have a choice, really. I mean, he's going to play. He was asked yesterday when he was in the locker room, does he expect to play right away? And he said, yeah, he hopes to. I don't think there's a choice here for the Chiefs. Down Okafor, Agba, and they need, a four-person rotation at that defensive end position. So, along with another newcomer, Damone Harris, with Frank Clark and Tano Passanio, there's your defensive end rotation for Chicago. I guess to me, it's a matter of how many snaps does he get. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think you need to force the issue though, because Passanio has been starting along with Okafor over the past month or so with Frank Clark dealing with the stomach issues. Clark is now back healthy. The one thing that stood out to me the most on Wednesday's injury report is he's not even listed on there anymore. So when Andy Reid told us on Monday he thought the worst was behind Frank Clark, apparently that is the case because he's no longer listed on the injury report, meaning he went 100% in practice on Wednesday. Granted, we still have 2 more practices, and he might crop up on there, or he might pop up on there, but I think it's a good sign that he will be 100%. With Suggs, it is very rare to get a player of this caliber this late in the season. And I remember I was talking to Laurent Duvernay-Tardif in the locker room on Wednesday, and he said when he heard the news, he was shocked because you're getting a player who was the 2011 NFL Defensive Player of the Year. He's a 7-time Pro Bowler, and he's got production. This is a guy who can hit the ground running, and he is going to help the Chiefs down the stretch.
How is he going to help? What can he do? What can he bring to the Chiefs? What's specific? I mean, he's 37 years old. He's got he's got the ring with the Ravens, and that was interesting too. That the sort of the chatter after he was waived on Saturday was he wants to go to Baltimore, where he spent the first 15 years of his career, and there was a suggestion out there that he might not play if he doesn't get to go to Baltimore. But here he is in a Chiefs uniform. What do you think?
I was surprised, one, that he was available, and two, that there were some Chiefs fans I saw like on social media, which I shouldn't pay attention to, but they were like, this is a bad move somehow. And I don't see any downside. I would have been in favor of this move if they gave up a 5th, 6th round pick at the deadline for it. To get him for basically $350,000, something like that.
Yeah.
And like you just said, like a plug and play kind of guy. He's not the player that he was 10 years ago, but he's got 5.5 sacks, 4 strip sacks, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, 4 forced fumbles. Yes. Yeah, that's the way to call it. I don't know if they were all strip sacks. But
And this is a defense that needs to be a little bit more dangerous. Like they've improved drastically, and they're playing really well. But you'd like to see some more turnovers, especially in the playoffs. And this is a guy that can obviously like rise to the moment. Like they're not going to play a game where the moment's too big for this guy. You know what I mean? So I think a slightly diminished or even significantly diminished Terrell Suggs is a hell of an option.
It's interesting. It's kind of uncanny he became available.
It's crazy.
Right when that injury came. And to tie together maybe all the things you guys are saying, I mean, should be a great fit in the room. I think they do think about that kind of thing. But Andy kind of distinguished this really well yesterday, making the point that, first of all, you got to know he can still play. I think it helped having kind of the feedback from Spagnuolo. I think that mattered, and thus the plug and play thing. So the thing that stood out to me yesterday, though, was seeing him. I always sort of joke that Tyreek Hill is just kind of a walking muscle, but he's like a 5'7" walking muscle. This guy, Suggs, is just, I mean, a tank. I mean, I didn't have any feel for that before, but it suggests to me that he's still got the power going.
If I can add something to Sam's main point here, this isn't like a Spencer Ware situation where Ware hadn't been out of football. We're talking about Suggs, who has played a lot of games in Arizona, and here's something interesting. He played 70% of their snaps this year. So he's got his legs under him, and he's, like you said, he's a plug-and-play option.
Yeah.
how about the teams that put claims in on him?
That's really interesting.
Saints, Seahawks,
and 49ers.
Yeah, all playoff-bound teams.
Right, and I guess the Ravens, there's some thought in Baltimore that he was going to slide through and end up signing with Baltimore to make sort of maybe a last run at a championship.
Not just all winning teams, good teams that hope or expect to be in the Super Bowl, but all good defenses.
Yeah.
You know? So these are teams with solid defenses that think that he can add something to them. I mean, I guess I just don't see the downside. It's a guy that's won a Super Bowl, probably a Hall of Famer. Maybe that discussion is for another day. But that kind of guy, like, just walks in with instant credibility. Like, that's the kind of guy, like, when he walks in, Frank Clark is pumped to see him. Chris Jones is pumped to see him. You know what I mean? Like, I think that adds something to it.
What's interesting too, you think about this, and we may never get to drill into this totally, but they both talked about Andy's conversation with him. Whatever sentiment there was for him to not want to be here, somehow Andy, I think, was the closer. And I just don't know if we'll ever get the real details on how much he, really didn't want to do that versus, he was just right there on the fence and needed a little love.
Could anybody have a conversation with Andy Reid and not want to come to the Chiefs?
Right.
I mean, seriously. I mean, how could you? We all have our issues sometimes dealing with the Chiefs and some dealing with Andy Reid sometimes. But I can just see him in that moment, talking to a player and trying to entice him to come to Kansas City and selling this organization and the locker room culture. Speaking of which, Suggs made a point to mention this yesterday during the 4.5 minutes. The basketball, how could you not love this, what's going on in the locker room right now, the basketball game? Well, we hate it because...
Well, yeah.
So what I was thinking was, Andy must have gotten word to the Chiefs, make sure you guys are playing basketball here today.
It was maybe the most intense game of the season, too. And they're going to love that basketball game until Chris Jones throws McCole Hardman into a wall or something during the game.
Turns an angle.
Well, look, the other
those games
day,
get intense.
this was just a ball that went astray, right? But it went up into the roof and hit part of the drop ceiling, which came down. And it just missed a couple people.
Right by McCole Hardman's locker.
Yeah, it was right by McCole Hardman's locker. And that part of the ceiling's still open. I mean, there's no way to fix that, but luckily there was no need to fix somebody below.
No point in fixing it either, because the
Well-
ball's going to go right back up there.
But it has gotten a little vigorous.
Yeah.
A little 2-on-2 action.
It's
yesterday.
intense. It's intense.
Can I just underline something you just said about Andy Reid? Like, he's always had that reputation of a guy that players want to play for, right? I think Andy Reid with Patrick Mahomes, because that's always mentioned too. That was mentioned by Terrell Suggs yesterday. That was mentioned by Tyrann Mathieu when he signed, by Frank Clark when he came. I mean, that's a big pull too. You got a coach everybody wants to play for, and one of, if not the best quarterback in the game as well.
But
It's a pretty good
we've
combination.
been talking for weeks about this improved defense.
Yeah.
How about a 3/4 of a line that would include Suggs, Clark, and Jones? Jones and Clark made their first Pro Bowls this week, and again, Suggs is a 7-time Pro Bowler. You got some talent on that. Not that you didn't with Agba and Okafor. In fact, I like the way both of those guys had played this year. But you're right. I mean, the timing of this to be able to have Suggs, who's probably lost a step, but not his power.
I think it's like this isn't an upgrade. I don't think from Okafor. He was playing really well, but it is just how many seasons? And the answer is probably one. But how many seasons could you go through and have a need at that position, and then hey, how about that?
Former defensive player of the
This
year.
guy's available. That stuff just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I think what you also can look forward to with Suggs, and you said something interesting yesterday when you said the Chiefs were 1 penalty away from the Super Bowl. So I think it's safe to say that if the Chiefs do make it to the conference championship game, Suggs will not line up off sides.
To say it was in his position too.
That was a nice little sub-tweet there.
By the way, a quick aside on this yesterday, because I thought I spoke to something we know about Patrick, but we don't always get to see kind of in live moment. He gets asked about his memory of playing against Suggs. He identifies an incredibly specific play, just off the top of his head, where Suggs went back into coverage, fooled Patrick, got to right exactly where Patrick wanted to throw it.
It's like a throw he didn't make. He remembers a throw he didn't make.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
I know we've talked about this. A couple of the older guys in this panel might sometimes have trouble remembering a score from last week.
What's the score?
No names, but the players only went over 60. But
Wow.
my goodness, though, isn't that not amazing? I mean,
I'll tell you what, it reminds me of a championship level golfer who can remember every single shot he has ever made, ever. I mean, ever taken, I guess. And I think that's what we've got with Patrick Mahomes and his throws, and not just his throws, but his progressions of each throw.
You start to when last year, last summer, everybody was doing everything they could to find out as much as they could about Patrick Mahomes. And this thing about, it's not a photographic memory. What's the term?
eidetic.
Eidetic
which
memory.
is closely related, I guess. I don't know if I can distinguish it without looking it up.
New
but
word, eidetic.
You kind of think
Lee Steinberg said the word, not me.
you kind of start to think all right, guys, he's not, just Superman or whatever, but we see stuff like this all the time where, it's last year, week 3, it was a 3rd and 4 in St. Joe. Remember when we had him for 10 minutes or whatever it was, or
20,
however long it was, 20. And specifically, what is a play that you're thinking about that is
I remember this.
emblematic of sort of how you want to improve? And he was like, 3rd and 5 at Seattle, first or second drive. I can't even remember it now. But,
It was 7:48 on the clock. We had about 4 seconds before the snap.
I went back and pulled that game up on Game Pass, and he was exactly. Freaking everything, every single detail.
Well, along with that, something, I don't know if any of the fans watching did or didn't see this yesterday, but it is really worth watching that 3-minute, 10-second video, whatever it was from the Chiefs, with Patrick mic'd up. There's many things in there that I think really are illuminating. One of them is, though, at some point he's sitting on the bench talking about something that happened week 7 on, not 35.
Yeah, the Broncos ran that play. Yep,
Yeah,
I remember
it
that.
looked exactly like that. I was like,
Yeah, has that in him, but couldn't remember his helmet over and over and over again.
that was weird. I couldn't tell how much that was for effect or how much he was really had to go out there without it.
All right, so let's use that moment to transition into the 2017 draft. And the
Bears fans, click away.
so 3 quarterbacks taken in the first round that year. And 2 of them are going to meet Sunday when the Chiefs travel to Chicago. The Bears picked Mitchell Trubisky, number 2 overall, traded 4 draft picks to move up 1 spot to get Mitchell Trubisky. The Chiefs traded a few draft picks of their own to move up 17 spots to pick 10th and to take Mahomes. And then the Houston Texans went from 25 to 12, I think it was, to get Deshaun Watson. So they're your 3 quarterbacks taken in the first round of the 2017 draft. Varying degrees of success, fair to say?
Slightly.
Fair to say. The trading up for Trubisky is the part that gets me, because
They were so
you're
worried
just-
he wasn't going to be there at 3.
Yeah, and then you get stuck with Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson. Can't have that. He's not. I don't think Trubisky. I think he's 17 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. I think this
I think
year.
that's right.
I don't think he's as bad as sort of the surface perception of him. He's in a tough spot because he's always going to be compared to those two guys. Like, there's no way around that. But it is football's version of Bowie over Jordan. I really do believe that. I can't imagine being a Bears fan and that. You know what I mean? Like, I just can't. God bless him.
I don't think there's any scenario where you'll ever feel like he overtakes what Patrick and Deshaun can do, right? There probably is a scenario where he becomes a fairly decent NFL quarterback, but it will always be gauged against the price they paid
Alex Smith and
and
Aaron
what they
Rodgers.
didn't do, right? Yeah.
One thing I learned reading, and we'll link to this story in the show notes. The Chicago Tribune did a wonderful story
great.
about a month ago on what the Bears' thinking was in that process, and one of the reasons that Pace, I think the GM at the time, apparently he was a big Drew Brees fan and
Came from New Orleans,
Came
correct?
from New Orleans and understood that it took Brees a little while to develop, and they were willing to, even though they threw Trubisky into the fire as a rookie, which is not the case with Mahomes, right? They were kind of be willing to live with mistakes, but man, the volume is so loud now in Chicago. That's the storyline if you're a Bears fan this week with Mahomes coming to town. What are we doing with Trubisky, and how do we not have Mahomes or even Watson? So, so the question to me becomes: all three of those quarterbacks we're going to be talking contract extension after this year. Should the Bears re-up Mitchell Trubisky?
I think this is really going to depend on what Matt Nagy feels is he the future of that franchise. It's interesting on Monday when Nagy was talking to the Chicago Bears media, he said, he emphasized this game is not a one-on-one battle between Trubisky and Mahomes. And unfortunately, you can't help but see it that way because
It is to me. I don't know.
when you think about the elite quarterbacks or the young elite quarterbacks in the NFL right now, there are three names that immediately come to mind. Russell Wilson, or actually four. Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and Deshaun Watson, hands down. And nowhere in there is the number 2 overall pick of the 2017 NFL Draft. Should he go a different direction? I don't know if you give him the contract extension next year. I think you got to prove it. You have to prove it because I don't think he's their guy. I just don't. When I watch Mitchell Trubisky, I don't see a wow factor. And then I think when you look for a franchise quarterback, you need that wow factor. You got to have a guy that's going to get the fans excited.
He's had some moments. I mean, he was in the playoffs last year.
But they made the playoffs last year mostly on the heels of that defense.
That's right.
That
It was great
defense was
defense.
phenomenal.
Yeah, and then they lost that game. It was a tough loss to the Eagles at home, a game they were favored to win.
Blair, you said something that bears just appreciating again, though. Thinking about, I don't think Patrick has the year he has in 2018 if he hadn't had 2017.
The redshirt season.
Yeah.
The redshirt season with Alex Smith. And if Trubisky had been put in that position, he wouldn't have done what Patrick did last year, but maybe he would have had a little more traction. And it sort of just speaks to the Chiefs having a good plan.
And such a good infrastructure. That was part of Mahomes. Like, it was, oh my gosh, like he's going to learn for a year and be under that coach, and it'd be fascinating. Obviously, there's no way to do this, but have those guys switch. What would Patrick, what would he be like in Chicago? What would Trubisky be like? I'm convinced Trubisky would be better here.
The thing that
Yes, Alex Smith like perhaps.
There's no way to know for sure, obviously.
The biggest thing that concerns me about this whole thing, and obviously we don't cover the Chicago Bears, but there are a lot of Chiefs connections here. When Nagy took over in 2018, remember, he inherited Trubisky. One of the first things he did was bring in Chase Daniel and Tyler Bray.
It was smart. It was a smart move, right?
Because they know the system, and if you have any questions as you're learning, you got Chase Daniel and Tyler Bray to learn from. And here we are 2 seasons later, and instead of moving up, I see Trubisky going backward, and that's the concern.
Can we point out also that the Chiefs' Twitter account this week said April 27th, 2017, a day we'll never forget, and then it's just a Mahomes highlight reel. That was not done accidentally. They could have done that last week
It's a
or
sub
next
week?
week.
Yeah, what's the anniversary
that was
this week?
This week.
Well, speaking of social media, I read this in the Chicago Sun-Times this morning that the Bears on their website, on chicagobears.com, they run the post-game audio from or the post-game press conference from Matt Nagy and from Mitchell Trubisky. The coach and quarterback are always at the post-game press conference, right? They allow fan comments
Oh boy.
to be, to be taken and shown during.
That's a
during
mistake in
matches.
Chicago. I tell you that.
And so Rick Morsey wrote about that this morning. It was a really wonderful story that repeated some of the comments that Bears fans were making during the during those moments. You know what? You bring up a good point too. The Bears drafted Trubisky probably knowing that John Fox wasn't going to be his coach.
Correct.
And it was going to. So maybe you can. I don't know. Trubisky, has already gone through a coaching transition. You could tell what Nagy did by, trying to create the same type of quarterback room in Chicago that he was part of with Mahomes in Kansas City. With the veteran quarterback, the coach. In Kansas City, you had Nagy, Reid, Kafka, Alex Smith. We've talked about that a lot, about how much we think that helped Mahomes develop.
There was a lot of that. That's in some other situations that might be a storyline or a narrative or whatever that a team pushes, to sort of make their decision and their guy, Alex, look good. But when you hear Patrick's dad say, I think it was before the Denver game, after the Denver game, went up to Alex and just said, look, man, I've been in these situations. I know how this works with a young athlete taking an older athlete's job, and I know you didn't have to do this. And thank you so much for how you treated my son. That's when it flipped for me. That's what every bit of skepticism that I might have had about whether that was a real thing or not evaporated in that moment.
This is kind of a minor sub-point added to that, but I hadn't thought about this till I spoke with Patrick's longtime strength conditioning coach, Bobby Stroop. And he made the point that Patrick's humility helped in that situation too.
Totally.
That Patrick was incredibly respectful to Alex, wanted to demonstrate to Alex he's not a threat to him, for lack of a better term, that he's there to learn from him. And you really couldn't bottle the value of that. And I don't want to say they were lucky, it was strategic, but it needed the right chemistry that happened to be there too.
Yeah, it took both sides, you're right. And they're both strong professionals, you know what I mean? They're both likable teammates. Alex was an incredibly respected teammate. I got tough, smart. You look at what he went through in San Francisco at the beginning and the end of his time in San Francisco. It didn't have to go that way. At some point, Alex could have thought, you know what, I like it here, and this is a team that's going to win, and I want to be a part of it, but, it's business.
Okay, other news this week, Pro Bowl rosters were announced. The Chiefs with 6, that's a good amount. I think only the Ravens with their 162 and the Seahawks may have had, I forget there was another team that had 7, but no, 12 for the Ravens, another team with 7. The Chiefs had 6. See if I can remember them. Mahomes, Kelsey, Hill, McCole Hardman, kind of a surprise there as a return guy, and then Frank Clark and Chris Jones. And then another group of alternates, including Tyrann Mathieu and Mitchell Schwartz. But that seemed to be the story that emerged from the Pro Bowl announcement, not who was taken, but who wasn't taken.
Yeah, I know.
Selected.
And I know Sam tweeted today, the Pro Bowl, who didn't make it is, I know you took to Twitter the next day, it's overrated and overblown. And I tend to agree with that, but at the same time, go ahead.
No. It's a broken process.
Correct.
But I wouldn't care about it, except that it matters in terms of how people think of careers. And it matters, this is something that Tyrann Mathieu brought up, that when everybody wants to get to the Hall of Fame, right, you want that ultimate honor, and that's a big part of it. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate that there's a process that is this broken, that Earl Thomas has had a great career, but Tyrann Mathieu's been a better safety than Earl Thomas this season, you know? And McCole Hardman has been a fine rookie and all that stuff, but he's a Pro Bowler, and Mitchell Schwartz isn't. It's a goofy process.
It is a goofy process, and one of the things I always wonder is, what are the voters watching? Because when I think of the top 2 right tackles in the National Football League, I've actually been privileged to cover both. Yeah. And I'm talking about Ryan Ramczyk out of New Orleans, who was also a Pro Bowl snub, and Mitchell Schwartz. So it's what are voters looking at? I think sometimes, especially with offensive linemen, it becomes a popularity contest.
Yeah.
And that's what happened, and go on defense. I think that's what happened with Mathieu. I mean, Earl Thomas has that name.
Yeah.
But Matthew, in my opinion, is having an all-pro season.
He's been incredible.
And last year we had this big thing with Darius Leonard, the Colts rookie linebacker. He did not make the Pro Bowl, but the Associated Press took care of that snafu by voting him All-Pro. In the grand scheme of things in the National Football League, All-Pro carries a little bit more significance than Pro Bowl, because don't worry about it, because if your favorite player didn't make the Pro Bowl, I guarantee you in 5 weeks, he'll probably be on there, because everyone's going to be dropping out, hey, I'm on vacation, or I'm still in the playoffs. So Mike, standing there in the back of the camera, he might make the Pro Bowl. That's just the way the Pro Bowl is.
There's also one other part of and then maybe we're too far into the weeds now, but one other part of the broken process is that there is an anti-right tackle bias, where, and we saw this last year when, no offense, Eric Fisher's he's a good player, but he was named right away, and Mitch Schwartz wasn't. Like, it just, that part of it doesn't make sense either.
And the crazy part about it, as the National Football League has evolved, most of your elite pass rushers are now coming off of that right side or the left side of the defensive line. J.J. Watt, Von Miller, and the list goes on and on. They're all coming off of that left side. So you have to have an elite right tackle, and Schwartz is obviously one of the best in the National Football League.
And because he was voted to the All-Pro. He was first-team All-Pro last
Same
year.
thing with him.
Which was really interesting. Didn't make the Pro Bowl, but which is also now available to him this year and to Tyrann Mathieu.
Sure.
I agree. That I had an issue with the Earl Thomas. Minka Fitzpatrick, certainly deserving of the way he's changed the Steelers defense. But Tyrann Mathieu, I like that point that he made to you. Yes, and look, we're guilty. When the Chiefs signed Terrell Suggs, we wrote 7-time Pro Bowler. That resonates.
It's shorthand.
It is. That's important. So I hope that he is honored the way he needs to be for this season when the postseason honors are announced. Okay, let's take a moment here and transition to our favorite segment, where the rubber meets the road. And this is where we identify Chiefs that need to come up big for the team to have success this year. And lately, we've thrown in another question or two. We will do that again this week. And the question, in addition to our Chiefs player to star, is in the spirit of the holiday. The Christmas gift that you have received in your life that you remember the most, made an impact. Could be when you were a kid or when you were not a kid. But Vahe, for that 60-year-old crack earlier in the show, we're going to start with you.
My first question to you is, is this hat your favorite gift? You start with me on both fronts?
On both fronts. Rubber meets the road. Give me a Chiefs player for this week and your favorite or most memorable Christmas gift.
I'm going to go back to the Tyrann Mathieu because I think because of this snub.
Well, I like this. Okay, there's
because of the snub.
There's a hook to it here.
This time he's going to take that ball all the way. There's a pick six in his week.
God, they're better.
Early pick six.
And he's going to hand it to a Chiefs fan he sees in the stand, and that'll be the greatest Christmas gift he ever received.
So that all comes together in
It
once.
does it beautifully.
As for the gift, I had a few things to debate here, but really it's the electric football game I got, like maybe age 8, 9, 10. And this game's not really out there for people as much anymore as it used to be, but people of a certain age can appreciate this game, and mostly for its sheer stupidity, because it was a board, metal board.
I had one.
You plug it in, and you put the players on there in formation, you turn it on, and they just start
Vibrating.
vibrating
They vibrated
around.
down the seal.
And once every 45 plays, a guy would just shake, and a guy would run, and he'd get all the way to the end zone, accept, and then he'd turn back, pirouette backwards. But it was.
I didn't know how to account for that statistically.
I know. You did those books you kept?
I did. I kept books. I kept stats.
So it's tough for me to top that one.
That's a great one.
Yeah,
that's a great one. All right, Sam. Who's gonna star this week?
Well, can I cheat?
You always cheat.
I know.
Asking.
But it's always interesting. So cheat on.
With politics in the news, I will not answer your question, as politicians tend to do, or answer it in the way that I want to. and this is like top of mind because it's kind of what it is what I'm writing about for Sunday's paper, Friday online, kansascity.com. The Chiefs struggles in the red zone. That's what I want to see. That is where the rubber will meet the road in my eyes in Chicago. They have dropped from second in the league last year at 70-some% touchdowns when they get in the red zone to 24th, I think, overall, something like that.
Maybe below 50% now.
Yeah.
Or right at 50.
They're right. I think it's like 51.1% or something like that. And surprisingly enough, I assumed when I went through and charted like every red zone trip they've had, and I assumed that they were running the ball too much or just not running the ball effectively. That's my bias coming in. And turns out that's not the case. So click on Friday to find out why. The present, it keeps hitting my head. When I was a kid, Nintendo NES, like the 8-bit, Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, it came with that game. And I wanted one so bad. And my parents were there was a hard no from my mom and dad. They wanted me to be reading books, or playing outside or whatever. And a couple times I would, this is how long ago this was. They used to rent these systems like at Dillon's or like just at the grocery store.
Yeah.
I don't know how much it costs, but you could have it for like a day. And boy, for that day, that's all I did. And my parents were like, that's why you're not getting one, because you will always be inside. And I'm like, if I always have it, I'll go outside more, and I won't need it. And I was convinced that it was never going to happen. And I don't know if they did this on purpose, but there was a Christmas, and it's all I wanted. It was like literally the only thing that I talked about that I wanted for Christmas. And we went down for Christmas, and like there's a pair of PJs, and there's like all the stuff I didn't want, and I'm like, this is great, like trying to fake it. And that was it, all the presents. And then I was like, oh, that's great. And they were like, is something wrong? I was like, no, I don't know. I just was hoping to get something else. And they were like, oh, I almost forgot. And then here's the Nintendo. And I think I saw them 2 weeks later.
Well played, Mellingers. Well played.
Hey, your voice sounded like that till like last year.
All right, Herbie, what you got?
Rubber meets the road. I'm going to help out Vahe here because Suggs. I'm going to say Suggs is my guy, and Suggs is going to pressure Trubisky into that pick six.
Wow.
So there it is. It's going to work hand in hand here.
Wow, it's like they
I
want
like
to swish. You can't just make the bucket.
That's right. You put pressure on Trubisky, he folds. So I think that'll be my rubber meets the road. As far as Christmas is concerned, I'm going to flip the switch here. I'm going to flip the script. I mean, to me, Christmas is the spirit of giving. And I'm going to go back to my first career because it was 30 years ago tomorrow when Operation Just Cause kicked off in Panama, which happened right before the Christmas holidays. Obviously, I was down there with HAC 5087th Infantry attached to Bravo Company 5087th Infantry when combat operations kicked off. On Christmas Day, patrolling downtown Panama City and seeing how the Panamanians were happy that we liberated them from Manuel Noriega. That was a fantastic Christmas present. So for me, it's the spirit of giving. And what I want people to also remember, because we're not going to do this, we'll do this after Christmas next week. Remember those troops who are deployed downrange at this time because they're not with family, they're not with loved ones, but they are standing on point for the nation.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to follow that.
Imagine saying Nintendo and then hearing that. Jesus.
Electric football, Nintendo.
But it was a good Christmas present.
We've had some great responses to this. Brian Hardy, this is to Vahe, most defining game of my career. Also, or my childhood. And then Cody and Drizzy, I hope I'm pronouncing that. Super Temco Bowl 90. Does that make?
Yeah, most people like Super Tecmo Bowl. I was an original Tecmo Bowl guy, the one with like the 4 plays. And
Right.
if you picked it, you were screwed, unless you had Bo or John Taylor on the slant.
Okay.
I really like that game.
The memories come flooding back.
Yeah.
Colin Clemens for the Rubber Meets the Road wants to focus on the interior of the offensive line.
That's a
thinking
good one.
about Khalil Mack and getting Mahomes. As for my Rubber Meets the Road, Sam and I thought alike. In fact, I wrote it down. I have Anthony Sherman as my Rubber Meets the Road. Sherman's he's obviously not going to be the guy, but he's important in the red zone. And, he's a guy that can score from the red zone, just out of the backfield, or can open things up. So for the first and I'm sure only time this year, Anthony Sherman will be identified as a player to keep an eye on this weekend. My Christmas gift, I'll never forget. It was a silly thing. You grew up reading newspapers and reading books, and I just remember when I was 12 years old, I got a Sports Illustrated subscription.
Yeah.
And I thought, Sports Illustrated, whatever. And then I started reading it, and I just thought, man, writing can be like this about sports. Look, I loved the newspaper and loved what I was reading, but Sports Illustrated took that to a different level, and I kind of knew then this is. I'll never get to be a sports writer. I can never write like this. This is unbelievable. But it gave me something to shoot for, I'll never forget it was the Lee Trevino Sportsman of the Year cover, and there was they always had a secondary headline at the top of the old Sports Illustrated, and it was about Ernest Hemingway's trip to Africa or something, and wrote about that. So I just remember poring over that first Sports Illustrated, and that was, I think it was 12. Very memorable. So, all right, let's wrap things up. And talk about so we all pick. How about who we think's going to win the game, or do they cover? I didn't see what the line was. And our resident odds maker, Sam McDowell, not here today.
I can find it for you.
Yes,
let us. Just give me a minute.
Yes, please let us know.
Chiefs have to be favored.
Cody, no, not the
saying
swimsuit
Chiefs
issue.
by 4.
Brian LeBurge, electric football, Nintendo, and freedom. Sweet Christmas. Thank you. Absolutely.
Chiefs -6.
I'm glad they brought that together. He brought that together.
6.
6.
Okay.
You thought more?
I thought like 4 or 5. But
6 seems about right. Do they cover?
probably. I don't think they'll score that much. The Bears. So if they get to 14, I can't imagine the Chiefs not getting 20.
Okay. What do you think?
I feel like Chiefs will cover. I feel like they've got enough to play for here, and I feel like they're surging, and this will be a good, not a routine win, but I think they'll win by 10 or so.
What do you think, Herbie?
They'll cover, and I'm with Vahe on this. 10+ points for the win.
I agree with that. I just think Andy Reid against former assistants too. I think he always dials up something special for
It's like
them.
the AFC
I'm
West.
actually going to be writing about that.
Right.
Yeah, he's 14. Hold up. He's 5-4 against his assistants the first time he beats them, and I believe he's like 14-6 overall against like Rivera, Pat Shurmur, McDermott, and the list goes on.
Okay, so but 5-4 first time he beats them. This will
Correct.
be the first meeting against Nagy.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay.
Sort of surprised he hasn't played them more. He's got 1,000 former assistants that are head coaches. But
I know. So, okay. Hey, look. So this is our last show before Christmas, and we wish you guys a great holiday season. We'll be back next week. Well, you guys will be back after the Bears game, which didn't get flexed. Did you guys hear that? That game did not get flexed.
Don't go down that road. I blame every team that had the opportunity to beat the Bears. So Cowboys and Detroit Lions, and the list goes on.
Hate 'em
I'm
all.
talking to y'all.
That would have been the NFL's Christmas present to us.
yes, that would have been nice.
But not going to happen. So Sunday Night Football, 7:20 kick in Chicago. These guys will be, sadly, Facebook Living at about midnight after the game, and look forward to hearing them then. And we'll be back next Thursday on Facebook Live. Thanks to Sarah, Mike, and Beth Welsh for being here, and we'll talk to you guys again soon.